Now, I will come to a few points on text stylistics. Many of you know English well, and you might feel that whatever you have thought you will simply write. No, technical writing has or demands some style. Now, a few things you have to pay attention to. First, who is the person? We normally do not write in first person. I have done this, I have performed this experiment. We do not write that way. We always subordinate the I and we write it as we. We have performed this experiment, we have done this. So, I is not the, we is the right form. We normally write in the style of we. Even if it is a PhD thesis in which it is mainly my work that is being presented, still we write we. We do not normally write I. In some cases, we subordinate the I, we part. The study was conducted, so that way we sometimes write, and so the person is important. Secondly, the voice. As you know, there are two types of voices: active voice and passive voice. Active voice and passive voice. We often have a habit of writing in passive voice, but in a technical writing, the recommended style is mostly to use active voice. Excessive use of passive verbs makes the text boring to read. Passive verbs means passive verbs would include is, was, has, have. These are passive verbs. For example, let me show one same sentence written in passive voice and in active voice. In a passive voice, we might write oxygen was consumed by the mouse at an accelerated an active voice would write the mouse consumed oxygen at an accelerated rate. So, in this case oxygen was consumed, this is a passive voice, while it is active verb consumed. So, this is a better, easier to read and more direct, and it is normally recommended to use active voice all the time, except for the following cases. There are situations, somewhat exceptional situations, where passive voices are recommended. For example, when it is necessary to draw attention not to the person doing the work or entity doing the work, but the work that is being done. For example, mosquito larvae were apparently killed by an infection. An infection killed the mosquito larvae. Here we are we are subordinating the fact of infection, rather we are stressing the fact of the mosquito larvae were killed. So, mosquito larvae were killed by an infection. So, it is basically a situation where you draw attention to the person or thing that is being acted upon, in this case mosquito larvae. And when the actor in question, who is doing it, is not important. For example, the aurora borealis can be seen in early morning hours. I can see the aurora borealis is not important. I or we or who can see is not important, it can be seen. The center stage is taken by the aurora borealis, and therefore, it has to be written in a passive voice. And thirdly, in describing experiments, I poured 20 cc of acid into the beaker. This is not the right way of writing. We write 20 cc of acid was poured into the beaker. That is a passive voice. So, in these situations passive voice is okay, but otherwise try to use active voice as much as possible. Next comes the question of sentence structure. If you know English, you know how to write grammatically correct English, but that does not mean that expression will be apt for a scientific writing, because scientific writing demands a little more importance. One important thing is that when we start a sentence, we start with a subject, and then the subject does something. Now, whenever a reader reads, then whenever the subject is read, the reader's mind looks for the closure of that. That means, what is it doing? And until the reader finds what is it doing, the rest of it, I mean, if you put a large number of words in between, then that number of words will actually not be properly read or given attention to by the reader. And it is relatively boring to read that kind of a sentence, even though these are grammatically correct. So, you should try to put the subject and the verb as close as possible to each other, so that the reader immediately knows what the verb, subject is doing, and then you put the rest. That is point number 1. Point number 2 is, whenever a sentence starts, the reader's mind expects right in the beginning, the reader wants to know what is it all about. So, the subject of the sentence is right at the beginning, and that is called the topic position. So, that is called the topic position. And when this reader has read the sentence, whatever comes at the end, that is what lingers in the reader's mind when he goes on to the next sentence. And therefore, whatever comes at the end of the sentence, that gets a stress. So, if you want to lay stress on something in the sentence, put that at the end. So, that is a stress position. So, the topic position is the beginning of a sentence, this end of a sentence. So, depending on how what you want to say in that particular sentence, each sentence you have to give attention to each sentence, and you have to place the topic right at the beginning, and deliberately what you want to stress through that sentence, you put that at the end of the sentence, so that when the reader goes to the next sentence, the mind automatically expects the next sentence topic to be what the earlier sentence ended with, the stressed. And that way a narrative can be engaging. you have put one sentence in which there was something in the stress position, what has been stressed, the next sentence elaborates on that. So, that comes to the topic position, and then something else is then stressed, the next sentence gets that as a topic position, and so on and so forth. That becomes a easy paragraph to read. So, this is how we normally arrange the paragraphs. Now, let me give an example taken from a paper, a sentence taken from a paper. Liquid helium when contained in a thermally insulated, the container is called a dewar, and cooled to 2.17 K, comma, displays the phenomenon of superfluidity. Now, this is a sentence that is well constructed and grammatically correct. So, there is no apparent problem with it. But the problem is that the subject is liquid helium. After the reader has read these two words liquid helium, then the reader's mind unconsciously looks for the closure of that. What is liquid helium doing? And only when he goes on here he finds, okay, it displays something, displays the phenomenon of superfluidity. Therefore, the closure comes at the end, and in between whatever words are there, that gets erased out of the reader's mind, because when he was reading it, the reader's mind was unconsciously looking for the closure. So, the attention was not devoted to this. So, if you want the reader to give attention to this, then you cannot write it like that. The right way of writing would be where you say liquid helium displays immediately, displays comes right after the subject, displays is the verb, subject is liquid helium. Liquid helium displays the phenomenon of superfluidity when contained in a thermally insulated dewar and cooled to 2.17 K. That is a better way of constructing this sentence. Same sentence, same thing conveyed, but in a better way. In this construction that I just said, there the topic position is taken by liquid helium, but the stress position in this case, in this particular sentence, is taken by the phenomenon of superfluidity. In the way I just constructed, in a better way, the stress position, the end of the sentence, is taken by the condition that gives rise to superfluidity. Now, it may be so that you want to stress on that point, the condition, under what condition superfluidity happens, then that is the right way of construction of the sentence. But if your plan is that in the next sentence you will elaborate on the phenomenon of superfluidity, not on the condition for superfluidity, then this has to be this has to come at the end. Then the right way of writing that sentence would be start from here, when contained in a thermally insulated dewar and cooled to 2.17 K, liquid helium displays. So, these two are again next to each other, liquid helium displays the phenomenon of superfluidity. So, that the phenomenon of superfluidity comes to the end and therefore, assumes the stress position. And if the next sentence elaborates on the phenomenon of superfluidity, then the reader will find it easy to grasp. Okay. So, this is how we normally construct technical writing, sentences in technical writing, so that the reader's mind is deliberately guided in a particular way. Okay. The things that we want to stress are stressed, the things that we want to state, but not with that much stress. This is the way to do that, to put something that is in the middle of the sentence that does not get the stress, something that goes at the end of the sentence that gets the stress, something that is the beginning of the sentence that is the topic. You are telling what it is all about, what the sentence is all about. Then a few relatively minor things I have to tell, because I have noticed that many people do not know the use of this. One is the use of hyphen, the N dash and the M dash. The hyphen is a short horizontal line. The N dash is a relatively longer horizontal line, and the M dash is even longer horizontal line. Now, this is of the width of the letter N, and this is width of the letter M. Now, when is a hyphen used? When two different words are being joined together that were earlier or normally not joined, then you have to put a hyphen, not a dash. But if you are telling from to, say a reference 2, 2, 5, that means 2, 3, 4, 5, all these references together, this is a N dash. Or if you want to say 1980 to 85, this is an N dash. In the Microsoft Word, if you go into special characters, then you will find there is a special character called N dash, and that is what you have to put here, and a special character called M dash that you have to put where you want to put the M dash. In case of Linux, just a single hyphen is hyphen, two hyphens are automatically converted into N dash, and 3 hyphens are automatically converted into M dash in LaTeX. When you put a M dash where you otherwise could have used a bracket, that means something that is you are giving a you are writing a sentence in which you have to put something that could have gone in a bracket, but instead you can put in a in between 2 M dashes. So, this is how we normally write. For example, if I write the supernova in 1987 happened in the small Magellanic Cloud, but then you have to in a bracket explain what the small Magellanic Cloud is. You might say then a dash, a M dash, you might say that a satellite galaxy, a galaxy satellite, smaller galaxy satellite to our Milky Way galaxy, again dash, then you talk about the rest. That means something that could have gone in a bracket, if you want to put in the sentence, then you put a M dash. There are some common mistakes that students make. For example, data is a plural word. So, there is nothing like datas. There are some words that are homophones, they pronounce similarly, and you have to be careful about them. Complement and complement, affect and effect, discrete and discrete, principal and principle. You have to be very careful about writing these spellings properly. The non is not a word. Non-linear, it should not be written as non-linear. No, non is not a word, and therefore, they have to be joined together without a hyphen. So, non-linear is single word. So, whenever non is prefixed to any other word, it has to be a single word. Et al and others has to be written like et al. So, and others. So, this is how we write this. That is I full stop E full stop comma. E.g. similarly, E.g. is for example. So, this is how the punctuations go. Always write say 0.25, this is right, and just 0.25 is not the way we write in a technical paper. Do not use the ampersand except for the situations where say science and technology, this is okay, but otherwise in place of and writing ampersand is not right. So, use and in technical writing. Criterion, criteria, phenomenon, phenomena. You have to be very careful about the singular and plural forms. Phenomenon is singular, phenomena is plural. Do not use the abbreviations like isn't, don't, write is not, do not, because it is a formal writing. So, these are the things that you have to keep in mind. A few words regarding fonts. Whenever using a font, always in mathematical part, say mathematical part you are writing x, x is a mathematical symbol and that has to be written in a specific font, specific character font, which is different from the font in the text. And in LaTeX, we simply put it in dollars and it automatically converts that into the proper mathematical form. So, anything that is in the mathematical symbol, that is to be written in proper form. The units should not be, that means these are normally written in italic, the units should not be in italic, for example, hertz, voltage, current. So, these or this has to be ampere, these units should be not italic, the usual Roman. The cos, tan, log, exponential, these should not be in italic, this should be in normal font. Okay. So, these are the things that I needed to tell you additionally in addition to the usual stuff. One more word of caution, many people make that mistake, do not use more than one font family in a single document. Times Roman as well as Arial, do not use it, just one font family should be used in a single document. Do not use boldface to highlight something, to emphasize something. Do not use boldface. Boldface is reserved for section headings and things like that. If you want to highlight something, if you want to emphasize something, use italic. That is the usual emphasis. And finally, I have to tell you, rather this is something I am borrowing from a writing of Professor Harry Sweeney of the University of Texas at Austin. He says, become your own critic, read the text aloud, either alone or with another person to check the flow of sentences and to find ambiguous or irrelevant statements. Ask colleagues or friends to critique your manuscript and volunteer to critique theirs. The most helpful critics are often those unfamiliar with the subject matter. Writers tend to become attached to their text and reluctant to make revisions. This must be avoided. Listen carefully to the questions your readers raise and respond by revising your manuscript rather than becoming defensive. He says, prune of material not essential for your story. The longer a paper, the fewer readers it will have. Delete words, phrases, sentences, paragraphs, figures, tables, sections that are not really necessary. Lengthy details can go into an appendix or supplementary information. Finally, give the preparation of a manuscript an effort comparable to that put into the experiment, computations and analysis. Working through the logic of the arguments is an essential part of a creative process, often leads to new insights. A well written paper will garner the attention that the research deserves, while an ingenious result presented poorly may go unnoticed. So, this is the final thing that I would like to say regarding the paper writing.